targeting low-income communities? Why are they coming to communities where they know that people don't have much, but sending 75, but yet they're gonna charge me 50K bail? That don't make no sense.
No sense.
That don't make no sense. So this gotta end. And I know all of us in here, we all taxpayers at the end of the day. It takes $270,000 to keep one person on the island for a year. So I mean, just 4 of us right here is $1 million. Who you think that's gonna affect the most? Whose pockets that gonna hurt the most? That's us. We complain that we have no money in this country, but yet we spend so much money to keep people incarcerated. That's all I gotta say, really. That's all I gotta say.
Introduce our next speaker, and thank you so much, Donzel, for speaking to us about the impact and the effect that this is having on real people's lives, real families' lives, real communities' lives. And we're going to keep that going. I'd like to now introduce Scott Levy from the Bronx Defenders, one of the largest defense organizations in the Bronx, providing much needed, necessary representation to those who are incarcerated, to those who are demanding their freedom and demanding that they be treated fairly before the law. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Scott Levy, who's going to share some remarks with you now.
Thank you. Where I practice in the Bronx, we represent almost 30,000 people a year in the Bronx criminal courts. We see day in and day out how our broken bail system ruins lives. People miss work, they lose jobs, they miss school, they miss healthcare appointments, they lose their children, all because they can't afford the price of their liberty. We see the damage that is done day after day, particularly in low-income communities and in communities of color. We're ready for change. New York needs change. We need to fix our broken bail system. The governor is ready. The Assembly is ready. But we know that the Senate is not ready yet for bail reform, and that we're here today to demand that they join the rest of New York, the majority of New Yorkers who know that this is the time for bail reform, in bringing comprehensive and meaningful bail reform to New York. Thank you.
Stand up like that! When black and brown people are under attack, what do we do?
Stand up like that!
When black and brown people are under attack, what do we do?
Stand up like that!
All right, so we've had some very impactful remarks so far about who is disproportionately affected as a result of our jail system. It's communities. It's communities of color. It are those who have conditions involving mental illness, those who are recovering from substance use. These are our most vulnerable, and yet before the law, they are not treated as such. They are not treated fairly. They are not treated equally. So this is about a demand to restore equality and fairness and justice to what is ultimately a criminal and justice system. I'd now like to introduce Andrea Nieves, who is with the Brooklyn Defender Service, providing zealous public advocacy to Brooklyn residents, who is also going to speak to you to what she sees day in and day out, providing public defense, zealous advocacy to those who are impacted, to those who are vulnerable, to those who deserve the absolute best. Andrea.
Andrea Nieves, and I'm an attorney at Brooklyn Defender Services, and we serve more than 30,000 people in Brooklyn criminal and Supreme Courts every year. In too many cases, a prosecutor's decision to request bail and a judge's decision to set it determines the outcome in the case. If the judge releases a person on their own recognizance, they will be able to fight their case while remaining in their jobs, remaining with their families, and remaining in their communities. But if the judge sets bail, knowing full well that this person is unlikely to be able to pay it, because as our friends at Catal said here, most of the people in our communities do not have $50,000 to get out of jail. What that means is when that judge sets that bail, the road to a non-jail or prison sentence is likely out of reach. This is not fair. This is not justice. No one should be locked in a cage simply because they are poor. We need to pass bail reform today, not next month, Not next year, today. The time for reform is now.
Bail reform. Now. Bail reform. Now.
That word vulnerable. And one of our vulnerable communities are immigrant communities who contribute so much to what America is and to what New York is. And so bail reform doesn't just represent making sure that people are treated justly and equally. It's also making sure that all communities, regardless of race, regardless of wealth, are treated equally. And with that said, I'd now like to introduce Darian Augustini with Make the Road New York, a grassroots organization in Brooklyn and Queens that advocates especially for immigrant communities. Darian, please.
Thank you. Let's start off, I'd like to lead with a call and response, so if folks can just repeat after me real quick. Is that cool? Yeah. Cool. Now. 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 More than ever. More than ever. All the brothers and sisters. All the brothers and sisters. Must come together. Must come together. All the brothers and sisters everywhere. All the brothers and sisters everywhere. Must see that time is in the air. Must see that time is in the air. Common blood flows. Common blood flows. Through common veins. Through common veins. And common eyes. And common eyes. Shall all see the same. Shall all see the same. Now. 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 Thank you, beautiful people. Peace and good afternoon. My name is Darian Agostini. I'm a youth organizer at Make the Road New York. As a youth organizer, my position demands that I be accountable to the lives of young people of color and the values of safety, liberty, and freedom that they hold. The governor and the legislature are in a position to be accountable to those lives, and they can live up to that responsibility by making transformative changes to our bail system now. Young people of color exist in environments where their activities, their relationships, and their very identities are criminalized, and we can no longer continue to keep people locked in a carceral state because we are too poor to pay our way to freedom. Governor Cuomo has said before that we can't let race and wealth be determinants in our criminal justice system. However, we know that that is precisely the reality we are faced with today. The solution to this problem is bail reform that transforms the current system and ensures it eliminates cash bail, ensure it eliminates racial disparities, ensure it does not continue to expand carceral state or carceral services through monitoring, surveillance, and also removes the ability for private companies to profiteer off of criminalization, to profiteer off of our struggle, our burdens, and avoids all collaboration with ICE. The impact of this not only lifts a burden from New York taxpayers who spend millions of dollars annually to keep people who have only been charged and not convicted in jails, but more importantly, sends a message to communities of color, to young people of color, to immigrants in our city, that their lives, that their freedom is measured in something far greater than an arbitrary dollar figure. The bottom line is we must have substantive transformational changes that bring us to ending a system of mass incarceration, a system of mass criminalization, and a war on disenfranchised communities. But we cannot do that without ending a bail system designed to keep people who look like us, ensnared in a criminal justice system because we are too poor to pay for our lives. We need action, and we need it now. Thank you.
To Akeem Browder with the Khalif Browder Foundation to speak to you about the urgency and the need for our Senate to get out of the way and make sure that we have bail reform this year because we cannot wait. Akeem Browder.
Good afternoon, everyone. New York State has 63 state Senate districts in New York, right? And in my neighborhood, in my community where it's the Bronx, New York, we are the poorest. Nearly 40% of the population of the district in the Bronx live below the poverty line. My family ended up suffering from one of the true weight of this money bail system, of the criminal justice system, when it came time to my brother Akeem Browder. Our family couldn't afford $3,000 to pay for his bail, so Khalif ended up staying in the system where he suffered tragedy after tragedy, where he suffered injustice after injustice. Khalif didn't have to sit 3 years and for New York to understand or wake up to the point that this is injustice to all our black and brown families. But no matter how many headlines that we've gotten in Khalif's name, how many stories that were told in Khalif's name, and people like Khalif, our state Senate still hasn't done anything about bail. Our state Senate still hasn't made a move to do anything to change or reform the bail system. Our family suffered not just with Khalif's loss of life, by Khalif taking his life, but our families that go through it with him. For 3 years, they put Khalif in Rikers Island, a torture chamber, but for 3 years, they put my mother and my family in Rikers Island as well, at home. Our family suffered too much, and there's time right now in front of New York to do something about our bail reform system, to do something about criminal justice with speedy trial and discovery. But here and right now, they have an opportunity in front of New York to do something that matters to us.